Chosen one. You didn't click on this by accident. Heaven aligned this moment because you've been carrying a weight for a long time now. You've tried. You've stayed faithful. You've kept moving even when the numbers didn't change. You're no longer in the dreaming phase. You're tired. You're confused. And even though you still believe, that belief feels like it's running on its last breath. Chosen one. Be honest with yourself. Have you been quietly asking, what am I doing wrong? Why does money keep getting stuck? Is it because I'm not good enough or not blessed enough? If those questions have been echoing in your mind, this message found you on purpose. This is not condemnation. This is confirmation. Anointed one. What you are experiencing is not delay. It is preparation. Scripture tells us in Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 3 that the vision waits for an appointed time, but when it speaks, it will not lie or delay. You are standing at that edge right now. The pressure you feel is the final shaping before elevation. Stay with this video until the end, because what you're about to hear will realign your faith, steady your spirit, and prepare you to receive a supernatural financial shift that cannot come early. Subscribe now to stay connected to this prophetic flow. Comment 777 and the city or nation where you're watching from as a sign that you receive this word, and commit to letting it soak into your spirit. Chosen one, let me speak to you from a place that is real, not polished. There was a season in my life where I did everything right on paper, yet nothing moved financially. I worked harder, prayed longer, tried to stay positive, tried to stay faithful, but the breakthrough didn't come when I expected it. What did come was pressure, and that pressure didn't just touch my wallet, it touched my identity. I started asking the same questions you may be asking now. Am I missing something? Did I misunderstand God? Did I wait too long, or worse, am I not chosen the way I thought I was? Chosen one. If you are here, it's because heaven knows you are standing in that exact space right now, not at the beginning, not in the middle, but at the final preparation before your financial elevation. And I need you to hear this clearly. What feels like resistance is actually refinement. What feels like delay is divine alignment tightening around your life. There is a moment before elevation that doesn't look holy. It doesn't look victorious. It looks confusing. You feel tired in a way rest doesn't fix. You feel pressure in a way motivation can't relieve. You still believe, but believing takes effort now. That's because faith is being asked to mature. This is no longer about hope alone. This is about capacity. Heaven does not release weighty wealth into fragile vessels. And right now, God is strengthening you where no one can see it. Anointed one. I've learned this through experience. God rarely announces financial elevation with comfort. He announces it with exposure. Old thought patterns surface. Old fears about money rise up. You start noticing how deeply scarcity once shaped your decisions. This is not to shame you. This is to heal you. Because what is coming next cannot be sustained by the version of you that learned to survive. There was a point where I realized my struggle wasn't about money at all. It was about trust. I trusted God spiritually, but I still tried to control provision mentally, and heaven had to interrupt that. That interruption felt like things slowing down instead of speeding up. Income felt inconsistent. Opportunities felt delayed. But what God was actually doing was breaking my emotional dependence on familiar sources. Chosen one, hear this carefully. When God prepares to elevate you financially, He first detaches you from what used to make you feel safe. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too small. The job that once gave peace now feels tight. The income that once felt like provision now feels like limitation. That discomfort is not ingratitude, it is growth. Scripture reminds us that manna stopped the moment the people stepped into the land prepared for them. The provision was faithful in the wilderness, but it could not follow them into expansion. In the same way, some of what supported you before cannot accompany you into elevation. And I know that hurts, because familiarity feels like security. But heaven is teaching you a deeper trust. Anointed one, you may have noticed that your conversations about money have changed. You don't think the way people around you think anymore. You don't dream the way they dream. You don't complain the way they complain. And that separation can feel lonely. I remember sitting in rooms where people talked about surviving, budgeting, fearfully shrinking expectations, and something in me went quiet. Not judgment, just recognition. I had outgrown that frequency, but I hadn't yet stepped into the next one. This is where many chosen ones feel misunderstood. People assume you've changed, become distant, become unrealistic. But the truth is, your spirit has been pulled aside for instruction. God often isolates before he authorizes. Before Joseph ever touched authority, he was hidden. Before David wore a crown, he was unseen. Before elevation, there is always separation. Chosen one. Isolation is not abandonment, it is incubation. It is the dark room where clarity develops. In that quiet, God begins to speak to you about stewardship, about responsibility, about weight. Wealth is not just money. It is influence, decisions, impact. And heaven does not elevate without preparing your inner world to carry outer increase. I want to be honest with you. There were nights when I wanted to quit believing for more, not because I stopped trusting God, but because hoping started to hurt. That's a place many people don't talk about, the place where faith feels heavy. But that's also where faith becomes real, because faith that survives disappointment is no longer fragile. Anointed one, if parts of you are being confronted right now, it is because promotion is near. God does not expose wounds unless he intends to heal them. Old money trauma, old shame, old mistakes you thought you were past. They resurface not to pull you backward, but to ensure they don't follow you forward. I've learned that healing always precedes increase. There is also a shaking that happens at this stage. Things begin to fall apart faster than you can fix them. Plans stall, structures wobble. What once worked suddenly doesn't, and it feels personal like failure, but spiritually it is precision. God is removing what cannot support the next level. Just as a tree is pruned before it bears heavier fruit, your life is being trimmed to hold more weight without breaking. Chosen one, I need you to stop interpreting collapse as loss. Some things must end because they cannot expand. Some systems must shut down because they cap your growth. And God does not ask permission when removing what would limit your elevation. He clears it out. Painfully sometimes, suddenly, but always purposefully. There comes a moment when you feel an urge to let go, even without full clarity. You feel restless in comfort. You sense a pull towards something you cannot yet explain. That is not instability, that is calling. Abraham moved without a map, only a word, and provision met him in motion. Faith has always required movement before certainty. Anointed one, what you are feeling now is the final shaping, the quiet tension, the internal stretching. The sense that something is about to change, even though nothing visible has shifted yet. This is the edge, and I say this not as theory, but as someone who has stood here before. When the pressure peaks, the shift is near. Do not rush this moment. Do not numb it. Let it complete its work in you. Because when elevation comes, it will come suddenly. And when it does, you will realize this season was not designed to break you, but to prepare you to stand without shaking. Chosen one, There is a sacred truth many people never hear because they leave too early, they scroll past the pressure, they numb the discomfort. But you stayed. And staying matters in this season. Because the stage you are in right now is not about effort anymore. It is about alignment. There is a difference. Effort asks, what else can I do? Alignment asks, what must be adjusted in me? And heaven always moves through alignment faster than it ever moves through striving. Anointed One. I want to slow this down for a moment because the enemy of this season is misinterpretation. If you misread what is happening, you will resist the very thing preparing you. Many people quit right here, not because they lack faith, but because they misunderstand the signals. They think the tightening means God has withdrawn. They think the silence means heaven has turned away. But silence is not absence. Silence is focus. It is the moment when distractions are removed, so instruction can be received. There was a season where I begged God for clarity. I wanted answers. I wanted timelines. I wanted reassurance that the financial pressure would ease soon. Instead, what I received was stillness. No dramatic signs, no sudden relief, just a deep inner invitation to sit with God without demanding explanations. At first, that frustrated me, but later I realized something profound. God was not withholding information, He was building trust. Because what He was preparing to release would require a calm spirit, not an anxious one. Chosen one, anxiety and elevation cannot occupy the same space for long. One eventually has to leave, and heaven will always prioritize your internal stability over your external success. That is why this season feels like a stripping away of noise. You may have noticed that certain voices no longer influence you the way they once did. Opinions that used to shake you now fall flat. Even your own inner critic has grown quieter, not because it disappeared, but because it lost authority. This is not accidental. This is spiritual recalibration. God is tuning your inner ear so you can discern without confusion. Wealth that is heaven-backed does not come with chaos. It comes with clarity. And clarity is forged in quiet places. Anointed One, another sign that you are in the final preparation is this: you are no longer motivated by proving anything. Earlier seasons were fueled by comparison, by the need to show progress, by the desire to be seen as successful. But now something has shifted. You still want growth, but you don't want noise. You still want increase, but you don't want to sacrifice your peace. That is not weakness. That is maturity. I remember the day I realized I no longer cared about explaining myself, my plans, my pace, my process. That was a turning point, because elevation does not require justification. It requires stewardship. God does not elevate people who need constant validation. He elevates those who can move quietly with authority. Chosen One, pay attention to this. If your need to explain is decreasing, it is because your spirit is strengthening. You are learning to stand without applause, and that is a prerequisite for receiving what is coming next. There is also a refining happening in your desires. Things that once excited you now feel hollow, not because they were sinful, but because they were seasonal. God often drains the emotional charge from old goals before He introduces new assignments. This prevents you from clinging to what no longer fits. It also protects you from mistaking nostalgia for calling. Anointed One, do not grieve what no longer excites you. That emptiness is space. Space for vision, space for responsibility, space for ideas that require more capacity than you once had. Heaven does not expand your life without expanding your internal room first. I want to speak directly to the financial pressure you've been feeling, not just the numbers, but the weight, the way it follows you into quiet moments. the way it makes you think ahead constantly. I know that pressure. I've lived with it. And here is what I learned. Pressure does not mean you are behind. Pressure often means you are being compressed for release. Scripture tells us that wine is formed through pressure, not ease. Oil flows through pressing, not comfort. In the same way, what God is extracting from this season is not money yet. It is wisdom, discernment, emotional discipline. Because the next level will require you to make decisions under abundance without losing humility, and under authority without losing compassion. Chosen one, wealth magnifies whatever is already present. That is why God works so deeply on the inside before releasing the outside. If fear remains, it will multiply. If insecurity remains, it will echo louder. But if trust is established, abundance becomes a tool, not a test. There is also a divine reordering happening around you. You may notice opportunities appearing and disappearing quickly. Conversations opening and closing without explanation. This is not instability, this is filtration. God is refining access to your life. Not everyone who could reach you before will be able to reach you in the next season, and that is protection, not punishment. Anointed one, you are being positioned, not rushed. God is not in a hurry, but He is precise. When the time comes, things will move faster than you expect. But until then, every delay has intention, every pause has instruction. You may feel an urge to simplify, to reduce noise, to pull back from constant consumption. That urge is wisdom rising. Elevation requires focus, and focus requires elimination. This is not about doing less out of fear. It is about doing less so what matters can breathe. Chosen one. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not being overlooked. You are being protected from premature exposure. Some blessings arrive late because arriving early would have harmed you. God's timing is not cruel, it is kind. There is a calm coming that will surprise you. Not because everything suddenly works out, but because you will no longer be shaken by what doesn't. That calm is a sign of readiness. When panic leaves, provision follows. When striving rests, alignment accelerates. Anointed one. If you feel like you are standing on the edge, you are right. The discomfort you feel is not instability, it is transition. And transitions are uncomfortable because they require you to release one footing before placing the next. But heaven does not let go without securing the landing. Stay present in this season. Stay humble. Stay open. The work being done now will speak for itself soon enough. Chosen one. There is a deeper layer of preparation happening now, one that most people never recognize until they look back and realize how intentionally God was reshaping them. This stage is not loud. It does not announce itself. It happens quietly internally in the thoughts you entertain when no one is watching, and in the choices you make when there is no immediate reward. This is the stage where heaven addresses the roots, not the symptoms. Anointed one. Many people think financial elevation begins when money increases. In truth, it begins when your relationship with money is healed. God does not pour abundance into unresolved fear. He does not release authority into a vessel still negotiating with shame. And so before the shift manifests externally, heaven begins a deep internal rewiring. You may have noticed that old money stories are surfacing, memories of lack, moments where you felt behind, seasons where you questioned your worth because of your bank account. These thoughts are not returning to torment you, they are returning to be confronted. God is bringing what was hidden into the light, so it loses its power over you. There was a time in my life when I carried silent embarrassment about finances. I smiled in public, stayed spiritual, spoke faith, but privately I felt like I had failed. I measured myself against timelines that were never assigned to me. And without realizing it, I allowed money to define my confidence. Heaven had to interrupt that pattern, not by increasing my income immediately, but by dismantling the lie that provision determines identity. Chosen one. If your sense of worth has ever risen or fallen with financial performance, this season is correcting that. God is anchoring you to something unshakable, because what is coming next will require you to remain grounded when numbers change quickly. Elevation without identity is dangerous, and God loves you too much to elevate you prematurely. You are also being trained to listen differently. In earlier seasons, urgency dominated your decisions. Fear pushed you to act quickly. Scarcity made you grab opportunities that were not aligned. But now you are learning restraint, discernment. You pause more. You sense before you move. That is not hesitation. That is wisdom being formed. Anointed one discernment is more valuable than opportunity. Opportunities can be abundant, but alignment is rare. God is teaching you how to recognize the difference. Not everything that looks like provision is assignment. Not every open door leads to elevation. Some doors are distractions dressed as answers. There is a reason you feel less impulsive, a reason you are no longer chasing everything that promises relief. Heaven is slowing your internal pace so you can hear instruction clearly, and instruction always precedes increase. Another sign of this stage is emotional honesty. You are less interested in pretending. You bring your questions to God without rehearsing the right words. You no longer hide your confusion behind spiritual language. That honesty is sacred. God responds to truth, not performance. I remember sitting with God and finally admitting that I was afraid of succeeding as much as I was afraid of failing. Afraid that more responsibility would expose my weaknesses, afraid that abundance would separate me from people I loved. Those confessions were not punished. They were met with peace, because God already knew them. He was waiting for me to trust Him with them. Chosen one. God is inviting you into that same honesty. The more transparent you become, the more stable you grow. And stability is required at higher levels. There is also a shedding happening. Old habits, old coping mechanisms, old ways of numbing stress. You may not even be trying to change them consciously, but they are losing their grip. That is because elevation demands clarity, and clarity cannot coexist with constant escape. Anointed one, this is not about perfection. It is about awareness. God is sharpening your self-awareness so you can steward influence wisely. People who cannot manage themselves cannot manage increase, and God is preparing you to manage both. You may feel moments of grief in this process. Grief for lost time, grief for mistakes, grief for seasons that did not turn out the way you hoped. Let that grief move through you. Do not suppress it. Grief is part of integration. It allows you to close chapters without carrying resentment into the next one. Chosen one, hear this gently. Nothing was wasted. Not the waiting, not the confusion, not the delays. Every season trained something in you that will be required later. Wisdom that was earned slowly lasts longer than success that arrives suddenly. There is also a redefinition of success happening. You are no longer impressed by appearances. You value peace over praise, integrity over image, sustainability over speed. That shift is essential, because heaven-backed wealth is built to last, not to impress. Anointed one, the financial elevation ahead of you is not fragile. It will not depend on constant effort to maintain. It will be supported by alignment, wisdom, and divine timing. That is why God is building those qualities into you now. You may notice that your prayers have changed. You ask less for rescue and more for readiness. less for shortcuts and more for direction. That is a sign of growth. God responds powerfully to prayers that align with purpose rather than urgency. Chosen one. The waiting you are experiencing is not empty. It is full of instruction. Pay attention to what you are learning about yourself, about patience, about trust, about surrender. These lessons will serve you when the pace accelerates. There will come a moment when you realize you are no longer desperate. Hopeful, yes. Expectant, yes. But not desperate. That is when things begin to shift. Desperation repels clarity. Expectation attracts alignment. Anointed one. If you feel quieter inside than you used to, that is not numbness. That is strength settling in. The storm is calming not because circumstances have changed yet, but because you have. And when inner weather changes, outer conditions soon follow. Remain attentive. Remain open. The groundwork being laid now is solid. And when the elevation comes, it will not feel foreign. It will feel prepared for. Chosen one. This phase often reveals itself through disruption. Not chaos for chaos's sake, but a deliberate unsettling of what once felt stable. You may feel like the ground beneath you is shifting even though you didn't ask for movement. Plans you counted on begin to dissolve. Timelines you trusted stretch longer than expected. Structures you leaned on start to feel unreliable. This is not because you failed to plan well. It is because what carried you before cannot support what is coming next. Anointed one. God does not elevate on old foundations. He rebuilds. And rebuilding always feels like loss before it feels like gain. I remember a season where everything I depended on financially seemed to weaken at the same time. Not one thing, but many. It felt unfair, almost surgical in its precision. I asked God why so much had to shift at once. Looking back now, I see the wisdom. If even one old structure had remained intact, I would have relied on it instead of stepping fully into what He was preparing. This stage is where control is tested. You are confronted with the limits of your ability to manage outcomes. And that confrontation is uncomfortable, especially for someone who has learned to survive by staying alert, proactive, and responsible. But survival skills do not always translate into elevation skills. God is not removing your discipline. He is refining your dependence. Chosen one, surrender at this level does not look like giving up. It looks like releasing the illusion that you can secure your future through effort alone. It looks like continuing to move wisely while trusting God with timing. This is a mature surrender, not passive waiting, and it requires courage. There is often a sense of vulnerability that comes with this phase. You feel exposed, not necessarily to people but to uncertainty. You don't have all the answers. You can't see 10 steps ahead, and that can be unsettling if you are used to planning your way out of discomfort. But faith is not about seeing far. It is about standing firm where you are. Anointed one. There were moments where I had to admit I was afraid of not knowing, afraid of missteps, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of letting go of strategies that once worked. And yet every time I released another layer of control, I felt lighter, not weaker, clearer. Because clarity often comes after release, not before. You may notice that people's reactions to you are changing. Some no longer understand your decisions. Others may question your patience. A few may even project their fears onto you. This is not rejection, it is differentiation. As God elevates you, He distinguishes you, and distinction can feel lonely before it feels empowering. Chosen one. Not everyone will recognize the season you are in. That is why God strengthens your inner conviction. You are learning to move without consensus, to trust without external affirmation, This is essential for leadership influence and stewardship at higher levels. If you need everyone to agree before you move, elevation will always intimidate you. Another hallmark of this phase is the pruning of distractions. Not just external distractions, but internal ones. Old patterns of overthinking, old habits of self-doubt, old emotional loops that kept you busy but unproductive. These begin to fall away sometimes without effort. You simply lose interest. That loss of interest is not apathy, it is focus emerging. Anointed One focus is expensive. It costs you entertainment noise and constant stimulation. But what it gives back is clarity and momentum. God is teaching you to conserve your energy for what matters. Elevation requires stamina, not constant motion. You may also feel a heightened sensitivity to misalignment. Things that once felt tolerable now feel heavy. Conversations drain you faster. Environments feel restrictive. This is not intolerance, it is discernment sharpening. Your spirit recognizes what no longer feeds it. Chosen One, honor that awareness. Do not override it out of guilt. God often uses discomfort as guidance. If something consistently pulls you out of peace, it may not belong in your next season. There is also a deepening of responsibility happening. You think more carefully. You weigh consequences differently. You are less impulsive with words, money, and commitments. This is maturity. Elevation is not about gaining freedom from responsibility. It is about gaining capacity to carry it well. Anointed One, I want to speak to the fear that sometimes surfaces here. The fear that you are losing too much. The fear that you might end up with less instead of more. That fear is natural, but it is not prophetic. Fear speaks from memory. Faith speaks from promise. And God always asks you to choose which voice you will trust. There were moments where I had to remind myself that God's removals are as intentional as His additions. He does not subtract randomly, He subtracts precisely. And what He removes is always replaced with something stronger, even if the replacement arrives later. Chosen One patience in this season is not passive, it is active trust. It is choosing to remain steady when everything around you invites panic. It is choosing obedience without guarantees. And that kind of patience builds authority. You are also learning to hear God more personally, less through others, less through constant confirmation, more through quiet conviction. That shift is crucial. At higher levels, guidance becomes more subtle, not more dramatic. God trains you to recognize His voice within, not just through external signs. Anointed One, if you feel like your faith has become quieter but deeper, that is growth. Loud faith is powerful in the beginning. Quiet faith is powerful in maturity. Both have their place. And you are transitioning from one to the other. There is a dignity forming in you, a steadiness. You no longer need to announce your process. You no longer need to prove your calling. You simply move aligned and aware. That dignity is not pride. It is confidence rooted in trust. Chosen One, the season you are in is not meant to be rushed. It is meant to be completed. Every layer of preparation adds stability to what is coming. And when elevation arrives, you will recognize it not by excitement alone, but by peace. A peace that tells you without words that you are ready to stand where God is placing you. Remain anchored. Remain receptive. What feels like an ending is actually the final shaping before expansion. Chosen One, there comes a moment in this preparation where the battle is no longer external. It moves inward, not as chaos, but as confrontation. You begin to notice how your thoughts respond when pressure rises, how your emotions react when uncertainty lingers, how quickly your mind tries to return to old conclusions. This is not regression, this is exposure. And exposure is always the doorway to transformation. Anointed One Heaven is not only preparing your circumstances, it is training your responses. Because what you respond to emotionally will eventually shape what you sustain financially. God is teaching you how to remain steady when answers are incomplete, how to stay grounded when outcomes are still forming. This is critical. Elevation does not remove challenges, it changes how you meet them. I remember a season when my outer life looked quieter, but my inner life was louder than ever. Questions surfaced that I thought I had already resolved. Doubts whispered, not screaming but persistent. It was uncomfortable. I wondered why, if I was so close to breakthrough, things felt so mentally intense. Later, I understood. God was strengthening my inner framework so it could hold peace under pressure, not just faith in comfort. Chosen One. This is where emotional mastery is formed, not suppression. Mastery. You are learning to observe your emotions without letting them dictate your decisions. You feel fear, but you don't obey it. You feel impatience, but you don't act from it. You feel uncertainty, but you don't collapse into it. That is not numbness. That is authority. Anointed One authority begins internally. Before you are trusted with more resources, more influence, more responsibility, you are trusted with yourself. God watches how you steward your thoughts, your reactions, your inner dialogue. These quiet disciplines shape the foundation of lasting elevation. You may notice that triggers you once reacted to now feel different. Situations that once caused anxiety no longer hijack you the same way. You still feel them, but they don't own you. That shift is subtle, but it is profound. It means your inner world is stabilizing. Chosen One, stabilization is not stagnation. It is readiness. When a structure stops shaking, it is ready to bear more weight. God is not delaying you. He is reinforcing you. There is also a refining of your self-talk happening. You are less harsh with yourself, less condemning. You recognize growth even when results are not visible yet. This compassion toward yourself is not indulgence. It is wisdom. Self-hatred cannot coexist with divine stewardship. God does not elevate people who tear themselves down internally. Anointed One shame is being dismantled, quietly, deliberately. Shame about past decisions, shame about timing, shame about how long it took you to get here. God is lifting that burden because shame distorts vision. And vision must be clear for elevation to function properly. I want to speak to the moments when you feel tempted to rush, to force clarity, to make something happen just to escape the waiting. Those moments are invitations to pause. Rushing in this season would only recreate old cycles. God is not interested in repeating history. He is interested in completing preparation. Chosen One. Patience here is not endurance for its own sake, it is cooperation. You are aligning with a timing that is larger than your anxiety, larger than your urgency. And when alignment is complete, movement will be effortless. Another internal shift happening is the release of comparison. You no longer measure your progress against others as intensely as before. You recognize that your path is specific, your timing intentional. That release is freedom. Comparison drains clarity. God restores clarity by restoring focus. Anointed One, the more focused you become, the more peace follows. Peace is not the absence of desire, it is the absence of desperation, and desperation never builds sustainably. You may also notice an increased sensitivity to integrity. Small compromises feel heavier, shortcuts feel misaligned. This is not moral anxiety, it is spiritual accuracy. God is aligning your values with your future responsibilities. Integrity is not optional at higher levels, it is structural. Chosen one. There were moments when I had to choose between speed and alignment. Speed promised relief, alignment promised longevity. Every time I chose alignment, it cost me something short-term, but it saved me something long-term. That discernment was not instant, it was trained, and it is being trained in you now. There is also a growing sense of internal permission. Permission to rest without guilt. Permission to wait without shame. Permission to trust without constant reassurance. That permission is not laziness. It is confidence. Confidence that God is active even when you are still. Anointed One rest in this season is strategic. It allows integration. Integration of lessons. Integration of healing. Integration of perspective. Without integration, elevation becomes overwhelming. You are also learning to receive without forcing, to allow without controlling. This is one of the most difficult lessons for those who have learned to survive by effort, but it is essential for those who will thrive through alignment. Chosen one. There will be moments where nothing seems to be happening externally, but internally everything is shifting. Those moments are sacred. Do not dismiss them. They are the unseen architecture of what is coming. I want to say this clearly. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not forgotten. The fact that you can sit in uncertainty without losing faith is proof of growth. The fact that you can wait without abandoning trust is evidence of readiness. Anointed One elevation does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly, slipping into place, as if it had been there all along. And when it does, you will realize that this season was not something you survived. It was something that formed you. Remain grounded. Remain open. The work happening now is deep, intentional, and effective, and nothing about it is accidental. Chosen one. This stage often carries a strange mixture of stillness and anticipation. On the surface, life may look quieter than before, fewer dramatic events, fewer urgent decisions. Yet beneath that calm, something is aligning with precision. This is the season where heaven finalizes placement. Not preparation of character alone, but positioning of timing, access, and assignment. Anointed One. There is a reason things feel slower externally, while clarity sharpens internally. God is arranging convergence. People, opportunities, resources, and moments are being synchronized in ways you cannot yet see. And synchronization requires patience. One piece arriving early disrupts the whole design. That is why heaven moves deliberately here. I remember thinking that nothing was happening because nothing was visible. I assumed progress would look like constant motion. Instead, progress looked like restraint. Doors did not swing open, they waited. And in that waiting, God taught me something vital. Not all movement is forward. Some movement is inward, downward, and foundational. And foundations are laid slowly so they can hold weight later. Chosen one, you are being positioned for sustainability, not spectacle. The elevation ahead of you is not meant to burn brightly and fade quickly. It is meant to endure. That is why God is aligning details you might not even be aware of, conversations you never hear, delays you don't understand, closed doors that quietly protect you from misalignment. Anointed One, there is also a shift happening in how you perceive success. You no longer crave instant results as much as you crave right results. You are more discerning about what you agree to, more selective about where you invest your energy. This selectivity is not fear, it is stewardship. I've learned that the closer you get to elevation, the more important discernment becomes. At earlier stages, effort carries you. At higher stages, discernment protects you. God is sharpening that discernment now. You may feel less enthusiastic about opportunities that once would have excited you. That is because your spirit senses weight. You are learning to ask, can this be sustained, not just, can this succeed? Chosen One sustainability is a spiritual concept. It reflects wisdom, patience, and humility. God does not elevate people who burn out quickly. He elevates those who can carry increase without losing balance. There is also a refinement in your language. You speak more intentionally. You promise less and deliver more. You are careful with commitments. That discipline is forming trustworthiness, and trustworthiness attracts provision. Anointed One, heaven entrusts resources to those who respect boundaries. Boundaries of time, boundaries of energy, boundaries of integrity. You are learning to say no without guilt, to pause without apology. That is authority forming quietly. You may also notice that your relationship with waiting has changed. Waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels purposeful. You sense that something is being protected by the delay. That awareness is maturity. It means you trust God's timing more than your own urgency. Chosen One. I want to speak to the temptation to look backward during this phase, to revisit old strategies, old connections, old ways of operating. Nostalgia can be seductive when the future feels uncertain, but what once worked cannot always be reused. God rarely repeats methods, He evolves them. Anointed One, resist the urge to resurrect what God has already concluded. If something ended, it did so with intention. Elevation requires fresh alignment, not recycled systems. Another subtle shift you may notice is a deepening respect for process. You are less frustrated by steps, less impatient with growth stages. You understand that mastery takes time. This respect for process will serve you well because the elevation ahead will require you to build, not just receive. Chosen One. God is not only preparing to bless you, He is preparing you to build. Build systems, build relationships, build stability. And building requires patience, foresight, and humility. There is also a quiet increase in confidence, not the loud kind that seeks recognition, but the steady kind that trusts itself. You feel less reactive, less defensive, more grounded in your decisions. That confidence is not arrogance, it is alignment with identity. Anointed One, when you know who you are, you don't rush to prove it. You move with assurance. God is anchoring you in identity, so elevation does not confuse you. You may feel moments of deep peace, followed by brief waves of uncertainty. That fluctuation is normal. Change, even positive change, carries tension. But notice this, the uncertainty no longer dominates. It passes. Peace returns more quickly. That is a sign of internal stability. Chosen One's stability attracts favor. Favor flows where trust resides, and trust is built through consistency over time. I want to acknowledge something important. This phase can feel lonely, not because you are isolated, but because fewer people understand what you are preparing for. Your conversations may feel misaligned, your priorities different. That loneliness is not a flaw. It is a signal that you are transitioning between environments. Anointed One. God often moves people quietly between rooms before opening the next door. This protects you from unnecessary pressure. It allows you to arrive grounded, not overwhelmed. There were moments when I wished someone would simply tell me when it would happen, give me a date, a sign. But God withheld specifics, not to frustrate me, but to teach me presence, to train me to stay engaged with the now, not anxious about the future. Presence builds capacity. Chosen One capacity is what this season is truly about. Capacity to receive, capacity to manage, capacity to remain humble, capacity to endure. Without capacity, elevation becomes burden. With capacity, it becomes blessing. You are closer than you think, but closeness does not mean haste. It means readiness. And readiness is confirmed not by excitement, but by peace. Remain steady, remain attentive. The alignment taking place now is precise, and when the moment arrives, you will recognize it not by surprise, but by confirmation deep within. Chosen one, as this moment closes, do not rush back into noise. What you have received was not information, it was alignment. Heaven has already set things in motion on your behalf. What felt like delay was divine calibration. What felt like pressure was preparation. You are not approaching your breakthrough, you are standing in it. Anointed one, this is your Kairos moment. The appointed time where effort gives way to grace and alignment releases what striving never could. A supernatural transfer is already unfolding quietly and precisely in ways your mind does not yet need to understand. Remain faithful, remain yielded, remain grateful in advance. What is forming now will arrive whole, stable, and sustained. May peace guard your heart. May clarity settle your spirit. May wisdom govern your decisions. And may the favor of God rest upon you as you step forward without fear, knowing you were prepared for what is coming. You are not late. You are not overlooked. You are commissioned. Chosen one, stay aligned with this flow. If this word resonated, you may gently seal it by subscribing to remain connected to this anointed space and by sharing where you are watching from your city or nation as a quiet declaration of faith and expectation. Go forward in reverence. Go forward in confidence. The season has shifted and you are ready.